My best friend's mom whispered, "Stay tonight," and held me close all night. The first time I noticed her, it wasn't in a loud, obvious way. It was a brush of air when she passed by, the faint scent of vanilla and rain clinging to her. I froze, caught mid-step, because she looked at me, and not the casual glance you give a stranger, but that slow, measured gaze that made it feel like she could see right through my chest. She stood in the doorway, mid-40s, elegant in a sweater that hugged her in all the right places, hair catching the lamplight, eyes sharp yet soft around the edges. Every movement she made was deliberate, confident, like she knew exactly what effect she had on people, and maybe she was surprised by her own warmth sometimes. "I didn't expect you," she said, her voice lower than I anticipated, trembling just slightly. She fiddled with a loose strand of hair, brushing it behind her ear. A subtle admission of vulnerability. I just came by to drop the papers," I said, fumbling them in my hands. My voice sounded absurdly loud in the quiet apartment. I kept avoiding her gaze, though it felt impossible not to notice her nearness. She smiled. A tilt of her lips, nothing more, and stepped closer. The faintest brush of her hand against mine when she took the papers made my chest jump. It was brief, accidental, or maybe it wasn't. My mind froze. Every nerve ending seemed alive, buzzing with something unspoken. The apartment was dim, the rain outside tapping lightly on the window, casting shadows across her face. I noticed the warmth of her shoulder, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the way she lingered near the kitchen counter as if every inch between us mattered. "You've grown," she said softly, almost to herself. Her eyes flicked to mine, lingering longer than polite conversation allows. I laughed nervously, unsure if it was humor or nerves. "Yeah, I guess. Time goes fast." She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, watching me. And just like that, the air between us thickened, small, silent, charged. I could feel the faint brush of her perfume as she moved to pour herself a cup of tea. Hands close enough that if I reached, I could touch her. I didn't, but I wanted to. Her gaze found mine again, holding, unyielding. "It's late," she murmured, almost whispering. I caught the subtle tremor in her hand as she set the cup down. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. The rain seemed louder now, a steady drum outside the window. My heart raced, in sync with hers. I could swear, though she gave nothing away. The tension was fragile, like glass, and I was terrified to break it or maybe desperate to. Then the moment shifted. She stepped closer, closer than before, the faint heat of her body brushing mine accidentally, or not. "Stay tonight," she whispered, almost against my ear, and I felt the weight behind it. Not a request, not a tease, but a plea wrapped in restraint. Before I could answer, the apartment door creaked open behind us, a sound sharp against the quiet room, and the spell broke for a heartbeat. She didn't move, and neither did I, both of us frozen in that suspended space between words, breaths, and possibility. And for the first time I realized that whatever this was, it was real, it was dangerous, and it was already too late to step back. The next few days, I couldn't shake her from my thoughts. Every time I replayed that whisper, "Stay tonight," it lingered like smoke in a closed room. I tried to focus on normal things, classes, errands, my friends, but nothing felt normal anymore. She seemed equally aware of the unspoken thread pulling us together. I found myself noticing the smallest things. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the slight crease of concern between her brows, or the way she smiled softly, like she was hiding something behind it. Her presence made the air heavier, warmer, and I kept shifting closer without realizing. One evening, I ended up helping her carry groceries from the car. The sky had darkened, streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. She laughed at my clumsy grip on the bags, and I noticed how the corners of her eyes crinkled. A warmth I wasn't supposed to feel, not like this. "You're really sweet," she said, almost offhand, but the weight of it pressed against my chest. I tried to answer casually, but my voice faltered. My fingers brushed hers for a fraction of a second, and the contact lingered in my memory long after. I began piecing together fragments of her life, glimpses she offered without intending to. A divorce that left scars she never voiced aloud, years of sacrifices for people who barely noticed, a subtle loneliness she masked with grace. And suddenly, her guarded confidence made sense. She wasn't untouchable. She was careful. Careful because trust was expensive and pain had been cheaper. I caught her glancing at me one afternoon while we sorted the pantry. She lingered close, not moving away, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, anything. But instead, she just tilted her head, lips pressed together. Her breath hitched slightly as she reached for a jar, fingers brushing mine again, a silent question hanging between us. It was dangerous, this closeness. I knew it. Social lines, age differences, the whispers of judgment that might follow. But the magnetic pull between us ignored logic. She noticed, of course. I could see it in the way she sometimes hesitated near me, then leaned in slightly, letting the warmth linger. Her eyes would flicker, and I caught glimpses of longing, or was it guilt? I wasn't sure, and maybe that uncertainty was why I couldn't look away. One night, while we were tidying up the kitchen, she paused and rested a hand on my shoulder. The contact was soft, fleeting, but it spoke volumes. I felt my pulse spike, and for a second, the room seemed to shrink around us. I wanted to move closer, wanted to hear her voice closer to my ear, wanted to feel the heat of her body. Yet I held back, because part of me was terrified of crossing a line we could never uncross. Her eyes met mine. "You're different," she said quietly, voice almost a whisper. I could sense her hesitation, the way her fingers trembled slightly on my shoulder. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I nodded, letting the silence stretch between us. In that pause, everything unsaid, desire, caution, curiosity, fear, hung in the air, electric and impossible to ignore. And for the first time, I realized that staying near her wasn't just temptation. It was becoming something I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. That evening, the apartment felt smaller than usual. Rain streaked the windows, soft but insistent, as if urging us into confession. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, while she moved around the kitchen. Every movement she made, the subtle tilt of her hips, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, made my chest tighten. I kept noticing the way her fingers lingered on the counter, brushing against hers, my mind replaying each contact. "I didn't expect you back so soon," she said, turning to glance at me over her shoulder. Her voice was calm, but the faint tremor betrayed her composure. "Yeah, I wanted to check in," I said, words faltering. My fingers tapped against my knee, betraying my nerves. She came closer under the pretense of reaching for a mug, and our hands brushed again. This time, longer. She looked down at our touching hands, then up at me, eyes soft yet unreadable. My heart thudded so loudly I was certain she could hear it. Her breath hitched, a subtle hitch that made me want to lean in, but fear rooted me to the couch. Then, the sudden ping of a notification on her phone snapped us apart. She glanced at it, a shadow crossing her face. "It's nothing," she murmured quickly, sliding the phone face down. But I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers lingered on the table, trembling slightly. I wanted to say something dangerous, but the words got stuck, replaced by a silence that spoke louder than any confession. Later, we ended up in the living room, sitting closer than necessary under the pretense of choosing a movie. Her knee touched mine, and we froze, eyes locking. I noticed the faint flush creeping up her neck, the small inhale she couldn't hide. I wanted to close the space, wanted to feel her warmth fully, but hesitation held me back. Every glance, every brush of skin carried the weight of what was forbidden. You never told me about this side of you," I whispered, voice low. Not sure what this side even was, desire, vulnerability, curiosity, but it felt like we were standing on the edge of something too fragile to name. Her lips parted slightly, as if she might respond, but no words came. Instead, she tilted her head, her hair brushing against my arm. Her eyes searched mine, a silent question or challenge, and I felt a pull so strong I wanted to close the distance, even knowing the risks. Then, almost as if the universe couldn't let us be alone, a soft knock echoed from the apartment door. We both flinched, instinctively stepping apart, her hand brushing mine one last time before she straightened. Our breaths were shallow, hearts hammering in a rhythm we both felt but didn't acknowledge aloud. I realized, in that suspended moment, that the pull between us wasn't fading. It was intensifying. Every small touch, every shared glance, every unspoken word dragged us closer to a line we weren't supposed to cross. And even as reason whispered warnings, our bodies and minds betrayed us, leaning toward what we both desperately wanted but feared to claim. The apartment felt alive in a way I hadn't experienced before. The rain outside had stopped, leaving streaked windows that caught the golden light of the kitchen lamp. Every sound, our breathing, the clink of a mug, even the distant hum of traffic, seemed amplified, charged. She was closer than usual, leaning slightly against the counter, her body just inches from mine. I could smell the warmth of her skin, faint perfume, vanilla with something darker underneath. My pulse raced. Her fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, almost unconsciously, and my gaze followed her hand like it had a gravity of its own. I didn't mean to pull you into this," she said softly, eyes downcast. The words sounded casual, but her voice wavered, betraying the storm behind her calm exterior. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Pull me in? I'm already here," I said, almost a whisper. My hand twitched as if to reach for hers, then froze. Her gaze lifted slowly, holding mine longer than comfortable. The air seemed to hum between us, thick with all the things neither of us dared say aloud. A part of me wanted to lean in, wanted to feel the warmth of her lips against mine, to close the distance that had been electric for days. But another part of me froze. Fear, guilt, hesitation. She took a careful step closer, the soft click of her heels against the floor echoing in the quiet room. Our hands almost touched again, hovering in that tiny space where everything could shift. I noticed the subtle tremor in her fingers, the way her breath hitched slightly as she exhaled. "I shouldn't," she murmured, voice low, like she was scolding herself as much as me. "You don't have to say anything," I replied, heart hammering. The words sounded braver than I felt. My body was drawn to hers, despite the barriers, despite the rules. For a long, suspended moment, we just stood there, inches apart, neither daring to move closer, yet neither moving away. Every flicker of emotion, the longing, the restraint, the tiny betrayals of body language, was on full display. My fingers itched to graze hers, to touch her shoulder, to feel the warmth of her arm against mine. Then, just as the tension reached a crescendo, she stepped back abruptly, breaking the spell. "I can't," she whispered, her voice almost cracking. She looked away, but her body still leaned slightly toward me, betraying everything she claimed to resist. I wanted to speak, to convince her, to close the gap that neither of us could stop noticing. But before I could, the phone on the counter buzzed. She glanced at it, eyes widening ever so slightly, and the room shifted. The spell was broken, but the weight of what had almost happened hung in the air. I realized, then, that nothing would ever feel the same. Every brush of skin, every stolen glance, every pause and unspoken word was now charged with possibility and danger. And neither of us could ignore it any longer. I thought I understood the tension between us, but that night proved me wrong. I had returned to help her with some errands she hadn't mentioned earlier, trying to act casual. But the air between us crackled with everything unsaid. She was in the living room, arms crossed loosely, eyes flicking toward me with a mixture of anticipation and caution. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, voice soft but steady, as if she were preparing herself for a confrontation she couldn't avoid. Her hands fidgeted subtly with the edge of a cushion, betraying the calm she tried to project. I froze, chest tightening. "Okay," I managed, though my voice barely carried. She swallowed, gaze dropping to the floor, then back up at me. I overheard something today. About you. The words landed like stones, and my heart skipped a beat. My mind raced. Had someone noticed our closeness? Had my own overthinking betrayed me? What did you hear? I asked cautiously, stepping closer despite myself. Her lips parted slightly, a tremor running through them. That your best friend, my son, thinks there's something between us. Her eyes searched mine, not accusing, but brimming with vulnerability I hadn't expected. I noticed the faint flush along her neck, the subtle tension in her shoulders, how she rocked slightly on her heels. I froze, unable to speak for a long moment. The confession hung in the air, heavier than anything else between us had ever felt. The thought that someone else had noticed, even indirectly, made my stomach twist, but it also made the pull toward her even stronger. I don't know what to say. I finally whispered, voice low. I didn't. My words faltered. How could I explain the way I felt without sounding reckless? She stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the heat of her body brushing against mine. You don't have to say anything, she murmured. Her hand hovered near mine, almost grazing it before retreating quickly. I just needed you to know that it's complicated. For both of us. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. Guilt, fear, desire, and longing twisted together inside me. Every instinct screamed to close the distance, to hold her, to ignore the world. But reason reminded me of boundaries, of judgment, of all the lines we weren't supposed to cross. And yet, the tension was unbearable. I noticed the way her eyes softened as she watched me, the tiny tremor in her fingers as she tucked hair behind her ear, the almost imperceptible sigh that escaped her lips. She was just as affected as I was, though both of us pretended otherwise. I want to be near you, I admitted, voice low, almost a whisper, trembling in a way I couldn't hide. Her gaze flicked down, then returned to mine, holding it longer than necessary. Then stay, she said softly, almost pleading. Just be careful. Before I could respond, a soft knock echoed from the hallway. Unexpected, sharp, slicing through the fragile bubble we'd created. We both flinched, instinctively stepping apart. The moment shattered, but the electricity remained, thicker than ever. And in that silence, I realized everything had changed. What felt safe before now teetered on the edge of dangerous, and neither of us could ignore the pull that was pulling us closer, despite the risk. The apartment felt impossibly small that night, though it was exactly the same as always. Shadows pooled in the corners, the lamplight warm but dim, making every movement, every flicker of expression, sharper, more charged. She was sitting on the couch, knees tucked to her chest, watching me as if deciding whether to invite me in or push me away. Her fingers drummed lightly against her knee, a subtle rhythm that matched my racing pulse. I wanted to move closer, but my body weighed heavy with hesitation, guilt, and desire all at once. I can't keep pretending this isn't happening, I admitted quietly, voice almost swallowed by the thick air between us. My fingers twitched, aching to brush against hers, to close the distance I'd been chasing for days. Her eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability that made my chest tighten. She leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her lips. I know, she whispered, voice low, deliberate, almost fragile. And I shouldn't. But you do, I said, heart pounding. You want it too. Her gaze dropped for a heartbeat, then returned, holding mine with a quiet intensity that stole the air from my lungs. I don't know if I should, she breathed, her shoulder brushing mine as she shifted closer, a delicate, almost accidental contact that sent shivers through me. I wanted to reach for her hand, to feel the warmth, to bridge the gap that had been tormenting us, but fear and reason fought against impulse. Yet she did it for me, slowly, gently resting her palm over mine. The weight of that single touch, soft, unhurried, was everything. Desire, restraint, longing, and surrender all wrapped in one. Stay, she whispered, leaning closer so her hair brushed my cheek. Tonight, Just stay. No words could describe the surge inside me. I didn't question it. I didn't think of consequences or lines we shouldn't cross. I moved closer, letting our knees touch, our fingers intertwine, our breaths mingle. Every moment was raw, human, electric. The tension that had stretched taut for days finally found release. Not in one dramatic act, but in quiet proximity, in the intimacy of near touch, in the unspoken understanding between us. I felt her shoulder press lightly against mine, heard the soft intake of breath as she leaned closer, and I realized we didn't need to rush. Desire didn't need to explode to be real. The closeness, the touch, the electricity, it was enough. Her gaze met mine, steady now, and I saw the reflection of everything we'd been holding back. Fear, longing, restraint, and surrender, all mirrored in her eyes. "We understand each other," she said softly. "Yes," I breathed, fingers tightening around hers, letting the world outside disappear. The storm, the interruptions, the judgments, they all melted away. For a single, perfect moment, it was just us. Real, messy, human, and undeniable. And for the first time, I knew whatever came next, we were in it together. Morning light spilled through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the living room floor. I woke first, half expecting the weight of reality to press down on me. But instead, there was her, lying beside me, hair splayed across the pillow, one arm draped over my chest, and the faint warmth of her body still clinging. Her breath rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm, and I couldn't stop myself from tracing the curve of her shoulder with my fingertips. She stirred, eyes fluttering open, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. No words were needed, the silence spoke volumes. There was relief, there was wonder, and yes, there was the electric pull of intimacy that had been simmering between us for days. "Morning," she whispered, voice soft, husky from sleep. "Morning," I replied, trying not to smile too widely, though it was impossible. My hand stayed lightly on hers, a quiet claim, a silent reassurance. She shifted slightly, tilting her head to rest against my chest, and I felt a warmth that wasn't just physical. It was real, human, comforting. "I wasn't sure last night," she admitted, her voice small, almost vulnerable. "But I'm glad we didn't run away from it." Neither of us spoke for a while, letting the quiet wrap around us like a soft blanket. I realized that the fear, the hesitation, the social lines we had worried about, they hadn't vanished completely, but they mattered less. What mattered was here, in this shared space, in the gentle closeness of our bodies and the mutual understanding in our eyes. Her fingers intertwined with mine, and she gave a small, almost shy smile. "I think I needed this more than I realized," she said. "I did too," I admitted, heart still racing though steadier now. "More than I could have imagined." We sat like that for what felt like hours, shoulders brushing, hands clasped, foreheads occasionally touching. There was no need for grand gestures, no dramatic declarations. The intimacy was in the small things, the shared warmth, the lingering glances, the unspoken promises reflected in our eyes. At one point, she tilted her head and pressed her forehead gently to mine. "We'll figure out the rest," she whispered. "The world outside can wait." I nodded, brushing a thumb over hers. "We'll figure it out. Together." Finally, as sunlight fully warmed the room, we leaned back into the couch, sitting side by side, legs tangled, hands still linked, the quiet hum of contentment surrounding us. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, messy, human, full of longing and understanding, and entirely real. And in that moment, everything that had been forbidden, confusing, or uncertain faded into the background. What remained was this: two hearts, different ages, different experiences, yet perfectly aligned in the warmth and closeness of a shared morning. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?